But I'll start with a Trivial Pursuits question. Have you heard of the concept rent-seeking, or the description of certain companies as rent seekers? Well, it's a very unflattering thing to say about a company. Rent-seeking is about an entity increasing its wealth without any reciprocal contribution to productivity. An example is when a company lobbies the government for grants or subsidies or tariff protection. Well, enter the new world of the latest energy fad, green hydrogen. What is mystifying to many Australians is the extent to which government seems to be taking its energy advice from billionaires. I'm no scientist, but I can read and research, and I'll be looking at the science of all of this later. But green hydrogen is the latest fad from the global warming warriors. And before I come to the rent seekers, let me make this point. Unlike coal, oil or natural gas, hydrogen rarely occurs naturally. There's a lot of talk about it today in the Parliament. It has to be manufactured. And it may well be that the process of manufacturing hydrogen consumes far more energy than the hydrogen fuel can recover. So how does that make sense? And what is unarguable is that the heat content of natural gas is over 3 times that of hydrogen. But put that aside for the moment and let's go back to the rent seekers. Remember again, rent seekers are people who lobby government for a grant, a subsidy or some sort of protection. So here we go. We learnt last month that our biggest hydrogen developers want the Morrison government to create a $19 billion net zero fund, and that was announced today. And we promised, Prime Minister, they say, this will slash emissions. Your taxpayers' money, $19,000 million, will be well spent, so they say. With the appropriate solemnity of speech, the developers tell us it'll speed up the rollout of green hydrogen, the new energy for the steel and heavy transport industries. That's what they say. Rhetoric, no proof. Business leaders calling on the government to commit to net zero emissions by 2050. So let's have a $19 billion fund managed by a net zero authority, taxpayers' money, your money. But that's not all. We're told that some of the country's biggest investors and developers, ANZ Bank, NAB, Woodside Petroleum, Wesfarmers, and of course Fortescue Metals, are members of the Australian Hydrogen Council, and they want more of your money. $19 billion is not enough. They want another $10 billion, $10,000 million of your money, and they'll call it seed funding, SEED, and then another $1 billion, $1,000 million annually through to the end of the decade. This is the rub. To be allocated to business, your money, through grants and loans, your money. And the Net Zero Authority would swallow up the Australian Renewable Energy Agency and the nation's Green Bank, more billions of your money shovelled out to business called the Clean Energy Finance Corporation. Now, Tony Abbott tried to get rid of it. But don't worry, the Prime Minister has already announced plans for $500 million, your money, in new grants to business to accelerate the clean hydrogen industry. Could we have some proof that this will come to something before we start shovelling out the money? But the $500 million in new grants takes the total government spending on that front to $1.2 billion, and they got today another $19 billion. And we're told it's all part of a, quote, national strategy to turbocharge the industry. And then a whole list of fanciful numbers are trotted out. There'll be 8,000 new jobs and $11 billion in extra income. No evidence of where these figures come from. But would common sense tell you that if our energy needs are going to be met by hydrogen industry, everyone would want to be in on it from the get-go? Wouldn't the billionaires want to tip in their own money to make big money if hydrogen is the new answer? After all, big business is always out for a quick quid. So why do they need $19 billion here and $1.2 billion there of your money? Well, here's the kicker. Quote, the hydrogen industry is not yet commercial and considerable investment is required, unquote. Shorthand for saying taxpayers' money. But when the little shopkeeper at the corner store wants to start up, his little enterprise is not commercial, is it? And considerable investment is required, is it not? Except it's his money, not taxpayers' money. But instead, the billionaires from banks and everywhere else, members of this Hydrogen Council, ANZ, NAB, Woodside Petroleum, Fortescue, tell us that until the industry reaches commercial scale, grant funding is essential. They want your money. Rent seekers. Do governments buy all this stuff? Or do they just love rubbing shoulders with the men of money and taking their energy advice from billionaires? After all, didn't the Liberal Party go down that path? Hypnotised by the Turnbull money? Because he had a quid, he must have all the political answers. but he had none. Do governments swallow the line, according to the Hydrogen Council, that, quote, public investment, that's your money, will unlock several times its value from the private sector? Do you know what that means? Your money is going to help the private sector make big money. No wonder the billionaires want the Australian government to prioritise project funding to increase hydrogen demand. They want more of your money to enable them to make big money. You, the taxpayer, stump up the money, and we got it today, and the billionaires just happen to rake it in. That's what's called rent seeking. If you, the taxpayer, are the principal funder of all of this, have you ever been asked for permission for your money to be used in this way? What do you think? Are we suckers or are we not? Alan at skynews.com.au or the text line 0414 000 848.